When you are an old writer, it's nice to think when you were a young writer. Because old writers and young writers live the best moments of their life. Because when you are a young writer, people are curious. Who is he? What is he write? Who is he going to be? Then, afterwards there is a period of maturity where the writer publishes one book, another book, and blah, blah, blah. And people are not so interested in middle-aged writer. When you become old, you become an old writer. So you have a long story to tell. And it's strange how young writers and old writers get well together. And it's very interesting for an old writer to discover young people, young talents. I just read a book of a girl who wrote a novel in French. She's 23 years old. And it's amazing to see how much she knows and what kind of languages she uses. And it's surprising. But myself, I also wrote my first novel, maybe I was 25 years old. And it's also interesting to go back, because you change, and to see how did you write when you were young. Also, as I personally write longhand, you change your calligraphy over the years. You don't write in the same way. And you change your language. For instance, since I was young, nowadays I simplified my language very much so. And in the same time, when I write a first draft, probably I am more comfortable with the language. Young writers are amazing because they, in a world of computer, of artificial intelligence, of people who only want to be in the marketing field or in the research or, in practical jobs, very important jobs like to be a doctor or to be a lawyer, or more simple jobs like to be a plumber or to be a workman or to be a craftsman, they decide that they want to be writers. And even if you don't write with a pencil or pen anymore, because very few people, I do, but very few people do it, even if you have to use the computer to write, still, there's not a big investment in being a writer. You can find a computer, take it with you, put it in your wallet, in your briefcase or in your suitcase and go around the world with your computer. Or you can even write with a telephone if you want nowadays, with a little mobile phone. Or if you still write longhand, you can go anywhere. You go into a hotel, you say, please, do you have a piece of paper? And then they obviously say yes. And then you say, would you eventually have a pencil or a pen? And they give you a pen, a pencil. And if you have something to write, you can do it. So it's an incredible job because you're free. You're not linked to somebody who is your boss. You don't have to have a studio. You don't have to buy a lot of equipment. You're just you and very simple material. It can be a computer or a pen and a piece of paper. And there, if you have something to say, you will say it. And so, I as an old man never regret this long choice of mine, and I never regretted, even as I said, in the years where you are a maturity writer, because when you are maturity, I don't know, between 40 and 60 years old, you're not anymore a young writer. So people are less maybe interested in you because there's all these new writers coming out. But if you become an old writer, it's different because you see that young writers come to you and say, how can I become a writer? And you say, just writing. If you have something to say, as I said, with your computer, your telephone, asking a piece of paper or a few pieces of paper, you can write. and then you will see what comes out. What is horrible nowadays for young, medium, or old writers is when they correct classical books, which is unbelievable. Nowadays they are correcting words and sentences in masterpieces, which are the history and how can I say, they are they're landmarks of literature, they're the people, the classics where you were formed, did you read when you were young, when you were in school, and suddenly they changed Tolstoy, or they changed Dante, which is unbelievable, because a work of art is a work of art, and it's written in a certain time, and therefore if you do that, you can't, first of all, you intrude savagely into a masterpiece or work of art, and secondly, you use the sense of history, because these books were written in a certain period with certain rules, which today are different, but nevertheless, they are historical, and if you want to kill the past in the history, this is not very good, because what is excellent is instead, and that's the way to be modern, is to be a contemporary person, to live in the world of today, maybe to look at the future, look forward, but in the same time, who are you without a past? If you look at another craft, which is paintings, it's easier to understand. You very often see that there wouldn't be, for instance, Picasso if you didn't know Cézanne. And, in other words, painters are following, they're not copying because they become themselves, but they come from somewhere and they go somewhere else, and somebody else will do the same afterwards. But if you correct a painting by Michelangelo, or you correct a painting of Raphael, of Rembrandt, of who knows, of Velázquez, or Picasso, or Van Gogh, what is it? How can you dare to do that? They were painted in a certain time with a certain thing. And yes, you have to be writers if you can. And you have to talk around the world about it, and you have to write your books and spread your books, because sadly, nowadays humanities are more and more neglected in universities, neglected in schools. People give much less money to the faculty, humanities, to philosophy, poetry, literature. And, if you kill literature, music, poetry, you kill the sense of human, right? It's okay, progress is important, technology is extremely good, and it helps a lot human people. But what is a human person without technology? You see the telephone is breaking our conversation because we are all the time disturbed. But if you write a novel, or if you write a short story, or if you write a poem, or if you draw something, you don't see the time pass, because you have such a concentration. You are into your own bubble, and that's it's a great adventure. And then, a writer is a witness of his time. The way of writing can change, I think nowadays, my view is that nowadays we should write shorter books. I do write short books, because I don't think that people have the patience, have the time to read a very, very thick book, unless they have a month in front of them and they can read. But if you are a reader, you have the habit of having a book in your pocket when you travel. You always have a book in your suitcase, in your briefcase, in your rucksack, in your pack, and you used to read, you read when you are in a waiting room of anything, of a doctor, of a school, of a job. If you have 15 minutes where you don't know what to do, if you have a plane, you travel in a plane for 1 or many hours. I mean, what can be better than reading? Right? Because it's good to watch. We live in a world where people watch a lot of TV, a lot of series, a lot of cinema, which is good because you watch it, but you don't make the effort of imagination that you would do reading. I mean, when you read, for instance, Anna Karenina, you don't really know how was Anna Karenina. She's described as a character. Each one of us can imagine his own Anna Karenina. Then you go to the movie and you see Greta Garbo, who plays Anna Karenina. So in your mind, Anna Karenina is Greta Garbo. So that's the difference between reading and watching. And it's very nice to watch, it's very important to watch, but it's also very important to read. And I am also encouraging to read real books because you can underline them, take notes, you have the contact with the paper. And then you also, soon or later, if you buy many books or you receive books or you like books, you can make a library, your own library. And then I encourage you, even if there is Wikipedia, if there are plenty of ways to inform yourself with your telephone, there's nothing like the atmosphere of a real library. I live in London. There is a marvelous institution called the London Library, where you can pass hours and find any kind of books, in any languages. And you have silent people who cannot telephone, cannot smoke, cannot talk, and are concentrated in the silence of reading. And this is very, very nice. And all over the world, there are beautiful libraries in America, in Europe, in Italy, in France, in Germany, everywhere. So don't neglect them, because if you only use your telephone, sooner or later the libraries will lose their purpose. And to lose libraries would be a catastrophe in the world. So I encourage you to go ahead, to look further, but not to lose the patrimony that we have. And I think that, after all, to be a writer is one of the best jobs, best things to do in life. Because, as I said, it doesn't cost much. You can do it everywhere. You don't bother people. In a city like Paris, for instance, where there are the cafes, you can sit in the morning, order a cappuccino or coffee, and stay there for hours and write and type and do whatever you wish, and nobody's going to say, why, go away. So it's to be a writer is like a big secret. And then what is really good is that you write by yourself. You are alone for many, many months, and suddenly the book is finished and it becomes everybody's book. And then you don't care about it anymore because you're thinking to another book. And the book has a life in itself, and you don't know who is going to read it, when is it going to read it. Sometimes they are lost and then they come back. I think, I devoted my life to writing and to reading, and I think I had a great life. So I encourage you to do this if you can and if you wish.